Hi everyone, welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is January 16th, 2018. Tuesday marked the 5th year of Prime Minister Abe's accession to the prime ministership. He's almost the longest serving prime minister in Japanese post-war history.
Well, he's getting there. He's still in third place, but with the chance that he's going to be reelected as president of the LDP in September, he seems to have a good shot at surpassing the two people who are ahead of him, which are Yoshida Shigeru and Sato Eisaku, his own great uncle,
right,
who holds the post-war record.
Pretty much of a gap between now and then, though.
There's still a bit of a gap, but nevertheless, it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of resistance to him having a third term. There are, however, going to be individuals who are going to be in the running for this time. Mm-hmm. People are really sensing that this third term is a last term, and therefore they have to put their markers out on the table, saying, I'm prime ministerial material. So he won't go unchallenged as he has in the past.
You think he won't go unchallenged between now and September when that election comes up?
I think that there's a small number of LDP wannabes who are going to be working on getting the number of Diet members, that is 20, to sign on to supporting them in an LDP election for the president of the party.
It's a dangerous gambit.
It's a hard one because who wants to be against the PM? Who wants to have his or her faction seen as the enemy faction,
right,
which is a possibility for faction leaders like Kishida.
Right.
Kishida Fumio has his own faction, and why would he want to endanger his people from getting jobs the next time there's a cabinet reshuffle? If he comes out as the enemy, he'll end up like the permanent enemy of Mr. Abe's faction.
That's right.
That the Heisei Kenkyukai, they never get anything in terms of major cabinet positions, and they just they're just on the outside all the time. They're the traditional enemies of the Seiwakai, which is Mr. Abe's faction, though he's not a member of it right now. He's on hiatus from it. Nobody wants to be the second Heisei Kenkyukai.
Sure.
So there's a bit of tension, to be sure. Nevertheless, one person who's not faction bound, Noda Seiko, who is also in the cabinet, which is very unusual, has already said in a public forum so far this year, just a few days ago, yes, I'm going to challenge him. Yes, I'm going to go for the presidency. We will see how the others, we're looking at a short list. We see, Kishida, whether he can get Aso Taro, the finance ministry, on his side or not, is the big question, to create a grand coalition of a super faction that would be actually larger than the Seiwakai.
What happened to that conversation, by the way?
I don't know where it's gone. Basically, Aso's happy where he is at finance, and he has enlarged his own faction.
They both did the calculus.
They both did the calculus, and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, maybe not this time.
Maybe not this time.
Then we have Ishiba Shigeru, definitely, who was defeated in 2012.
And has been very quiet recently.
He's been very quiet, but especially, well, he lost his most vocal supporter, which was Koike Yuriko, who was knocked down by Abe's maneuvering in the election, or the move toward the election in October. She's a much diminished force here in Tokyo, and certainly she was basically his wing person, I guess. So he's kind of quiet in that regard. So that's those three, and then there's always the dark horse in his own view, Kono Taro.
Right.
All of them have approximately the same number of elections to the Diet, so they're all in that class of people who have some seasoning.
Right. Have held ministerial portfolio.
And they've had about 8 or more elections to the Diet, which is generally, you're in good company at that point. Abe has actually been able to rise into the prime ministership with fewer than that. In fact, many say that his first term in office, he was too wet behind the ears. He was too fresh, had too few elections. He should never have been considered. That was the politics of then. This is the politics of now. Now, they're also, some of them are in the cabinet. Kono Taro is in the cabinet. Noda Seiko is in the cabinet. Kishida was moved out of the cabinet and is now positioned, even though as a Sanyaku position in the party, to challenge Abe in a formal way that does not break down the consensus in the cabinet.
Well, the prime minister doesn't want to entice that. He doesn't want to invite it. And in fact, the incumbency, I mean, the power of the incumbency is so, it has become so powerful over the last, 15 years, that I think it would be a really hard challenge to go against a sitting prime minister. And probably that tells us that the current prime minister will hedge his bets, he'll play it safe, he won't really do anything that's going to shake up the electorate.
You can see it both ways. In terms of people wanting to challenge, they have to get their names. You simply can't keep on deferring. And that's something that's may haunt Ishiba. If he thinks that he can sit this one out because no one's going to defeat Abe, I'll take over later. First of all, he's getting up there in years too.
Right.
But there are going to be others who are having gone through the process again, and indeed, in the case of Noda and Konotaro has actually run for the presidency, and Noda was the only person who challenged Abe in any way in the last election cycle. They're going to put themselves forward, and if Ishiba bails again, he'll have a reputation of being a guy who doesn't have the stuff. So it's not going to be a cakewalk like last time. There's going to be acrimony. There's going to be some kind of internal discussions, and there are factions that are dissatisfied that really say you can't really keep the premiership in one faction.
Right.
Decade after decade after decade, this has to change. We have to go back to the old style LDP where we trade off, where we share. That's the argument. Whether that was ever really true about the old style LDP is another matter entirely.
On the other side of the fence, Michael, we have two voices that have been really making a lot of noise recently: former Prime Minister Koizumi and Ichiro Ozawa.
Yeah, in terms of Koizumi, he's done something that, it's quite natural for him, but he's finally said Abe's, at least energy plans, are insane and an embarrassment. And interestingly...
Yes, he's got support there.
He's got support there from within the cabinet in terms of Konotaro, who, just this weekend, while taking a tour of Europe, said, it's true, we don't emphasize renewables enough. Our commitment to them as a government is embarrassing.
Yes.
Wow, something that you would not expect out of, again, the cabinet. The cabinet...
But you might expect out of Konotaro.
We need to remind our viewers, the cabinet is absolutely consensual. All decisions of the cabinet are unanimous, and if you disagree on something that the cabinet votes on, you're out.
You're out.
It's not like 13-1 or 14-2 or whatever. No, you're out.
Which is why the cabinet approval ratings are so carefully watched by the Japanese population, by us here on this program.
And also how it can be that the prime minister personally can be less popular than the cabinet as a whole. The cabinet is constitutionally and also visually can be seen as a greater entity than the prime minister himself. And in fact, in Japanese history, it has been, because a lot of the prime ministers were colorless nobodies. Right. That's not the case with Mr. Abe. He's not colorless, and he's not a nobody. But and he does dominate the political sphere. Nevertheless, the cabinet is a corporate animal.
Right. How about Ozawa?
Ozawa, well, maybe I'm going to let you handle that one.
Well, no, he came out right at the beginning of the new year and saying, the prime minister is terrible. He should not be prime minister. We should form this grand coalition of the opposition, and we should challenge him.
Yeah, he's always into the grand coalition of the opposition.
He is. I don't know why,
especially since he has how many people in his party now? I would be into grand coalitions as well. I'd like to have a couple of friends over as well when you get down to the numbers he has in the Liberal Party. To give Ozawa his due, he is the architect of much of the political world that now exists. He was the one who made the reforms in the LDP, made the reforms happen in terms of the electoral system that we now have. And also, he was the one who came up with the idea of a normal nation.
He got a little bit ahead of the cavalry.
He went way ahead of the cavalry, and when it wasn't going to go with him,
right,
he opted out of the party and led to the first breakup and the loss of power by the LDP. So any biography of him has to acknowledge that he has been the most important political actor of the last 40, 50 years. Nevertheless,
He wants another shot.
he can't understand that he's not that guy anymore.
Right.
That the world has passed him on. I follow his Twitter feed. I love the things that he says. They're very cogent. And at the same time, he's one of the most hated individuals in Japanese politics, and the one that is demonized immediately whenever he sticks his head up.
Okay, so we're talking about the prime minister now. We're talking about his election, the LDP election, coming up in September.
That's going to have to deal with what happens in the year. This is the fifth
right.
year. And a lot of people are saying, okay, you've been in power 5 years. What have you got to show for it? And he gives out, they toss out some statistics. The government says, there are 1.56 jobs for every job seeker. Isn't that fantastic? It's the highest rate ever. And the stock market, have you seen how high it is? It's highest it's been for so, and they have all these wonderful stories. But for Abe's core believers, the core followers,
right.
the story that they have wanted, the reassertion of Japanese pride, of patriotism, of changing the constitution, allowing for Japan to have its own, have a military, abolishing Article 9. That agenda has gone nowhere. And even amending the constitution in a mild way also has gone nowhere during these 5 years. That chicken is coming home to roost, and you heard it in his New Year's message that I'm now committed. For some reason, it has something to do with the 150th anniversary of the Meiji Restoration.
Which was a big deal.
Which was
150 years ago, that was a big deal.
It is the biggest deal ever. And Mr. Abe is a man of Choshu. He's from the area of Japan, which has provided the most prime ministers and created, along with Satsuma, which is now Kagoshima Prefecture, set up the revolution that overthrew the Tokugawa and set Japan on its modernizing course. And here in the 150th anniversary, I suddenly am energized. After 5 years, I suddenly have woken up.
Right.
I'm going to make all these things happen.
Well, it's a bit of a dicey proposition because
it's incredibly dicey.
Well, as we said, I mean, he's between now and September, he's got to shore up his support. He's got to do things without making much of a mistake.
Okay, first he has to the diet session starts January 22nd. They have to finish the budget on time, which means the end of February, because the month of March is for that famous constitutional. If the House of Councilors acts or does not act, the budget that's passed by the House of Reps becomes the budget for the nation. So they got it. Those first 2 months are gone. All right. Then we have April 1st. We can start talking about other things. Okay. And after April 1st, you only have 2 more months of the diet. And then the diet goes into recess, and there's no need to have another diet unless there's an extraordinary diet called.
Right.
Then, that takes us into September, where's the election. And again, you're right. He's probably going to think, keep it calm, keep it cool.
Right.
Okay, and then let's say he's reelected. Then they have to start into the process for the abdication of the emperor, which is going to take place in May the next year.
Right.
And they're going to want things calm and cool then. So when is he going to do his constitutional revision?
Yeah.
It's just the windows are closing on him. Nevertheless, all his declarations, he's been coming out all the time. He's appearing on the right-wing news channels like TV Sakura, making all kinds of bold, chesty remarks. It's really an interesting process. I don't know if he's just high on Meiji or just. He thinks he has to deliver.
I don't know. I think probably what's going on in North Korea is also emboldened him. He must do something, and I think his action to date has been kind of weak and timid. He's waiting and relying on the United States, and I think he's kind of up to here with that. He knows that he needs to have more punch. He needs to be able to say things forcefully, and he needs to have a Japan that he can defend.
And then you're going to see that in the budget that's coming out, particularly in terms of defense spending, including what is really blowing out a lot of people's circuits, the acquisition of what are, you can argue whether they're long or medium range cruise missiles, but nevertheless, a fire from across over the horizon weapon to attack a surface target,
right.
which Japan has stayed away from out of its defense-only basic strategy of security. That is officially the position of Japan, that it's
defensive only.
That military is not a military for its self-defense forces, and defense is the mean. It's a defense only. We will not have offensive weapons. But when you have an F-35, which is a stealth platform, it can go underneath the radars of other countries, and you now have a long-range cruise missile that is fired from it, you have offensive capabilities. And there's going to be a huge fight in the Diet over this planned discussion of this possible acquisition of these cruise missiles from the United States.
That discussion is going to come up not for this Diet session or not for this budget session, but for the next budget session, right?
But nevertheless, the opposition can bring it up at any time in Diet budget deliberations, and we're going to be seeing it.
Right.
What are you actually deviating from Japan's stated international position of the last 70 years? Are you so certain that the United States cannot be relied upon to defend Japan and to be this, the old metaphor is Japan is the shield, the U.S. is the spear.
Right.
And the U.S. has the offensive capabilities, Japan has the defensive capabilities. Are you really going to get the point of the spear in your own hand? And that's going to be a very, very virulent argument.
I'm sorry, we're going a little bit long in this session, but isn't it interesting that the missile tests have there's been a bit of a hiatus there, and that's given a long breathing room not only to the United States but also to the Prime Minister. All you need, though, is a little bit of a trigger to kind of crank this thing up again, and then the Prime Minister can say, "See, this is why I'm doing it. I need to protect the nation. We need to have a strong defense."
Yeah, there was some brouhaha over the weekend when Onodera, the defense minister, went and visited the Aegis Ashore radars in Hawaii, whether he indeed misspoke about what the purposes of these new capabilities that Japan is studying to buy. Ostensibly, the official line everywhere is that this is to defend against missiles from the DPRK,
right,
and nothing else. But there's some sense that in the reporting that there was some kind of hinting or mention about defending against Chinese missiles or Russian missiles. And with that being thrown in the mix, that again is going to lead to pressure on Japan to not acquire what most Japanese actually think are actually very, very important defense measures.
Okay. Well, listen, Michael, not to put you on the spot, because I almost never put you on the spot.
Almost never.
What are your views on what's happening to Japan, within Japanese politics, within the next 3 or 4 months?
The real issue is whether, I think for me, is whether Japan will be able to get the shrunken TPP together and get all those countries on board. That would give Abe some kind of platform to go to. It looks like Canada's opting out, go to the Canadian Prime Minister and say, come on, we've already arranged everything, come back in, and then swivel around and go to Donald Trump,
right,
who is in his own kettle of fish right now. But nevertheless, get the United States back on board, because even if constitutional revision, even if all kinds of other machinations don't come through, getting the United States bought into the East Asian region was always Japan's major goal in TPP. It's a security-related trade pact. That's something that I think that they'll actually be able to make some real progress with, and it'll actually have a great deal of public support. Nevertheless, in terms of politics within the Diet, it's going to be all about the budget, and that's going to be stymied by these questions about the defense-only position of Japan, or reemergence of stories having to do with either Kakue Gakuen or Moritomo Gakuen, these friends of Abe who get these really neat deals. We had, over the break, this scandal involving this supercomputer company, which basically hadn't put on a show of new technologies, but actually wasn't able to produce anything.
Yes.
And they took large amounts of government money
to come.
And where they, there are all kinds of really weird companies that the government has been investing in as a part of its growth strategy. These things are going to emerge. This company that wants to put advertising on the moon, for example, your logo here, sending up a moon probe. Many of these things are now mostly government funded. And this Friends of Abe effect is probably going to become, I think, a major issue in the next few months.
The Prime Minister enjoying his 6th year as Prime Minister. Please stay tuned.